I thought moving into this neighborhood would be the start of a peaceful life. But I was wrong. It began with a simple letter, one that accused me of violating an HOA rule I'd never even heard of. Within days, the fines piled up, neighbors started whispering, and the board made it clear I was their next target. But I wasn't prepared for how far they'd go, or how deep this battle would cut. By the time it ended, someone's life would change forever. What would you have done if it were you? For Sarah Mitchell, moving into Willow Creek Estates felt like a dream come true. After years of working double shifts and saving every extra dollar, she finally bought a cozy two-story home tucked neatly at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. The neighborhood looked like something straight out of a postcard. Manicured lawns, white picket fences, and neighbors who waved when you drove by. Sarah had always imagined raising her 8-year-old son, Ethan, in a safe and friendly community. And at first, Willow Creek seemed perfect. Kids rode their bikes on the sidewalks, families held weekend barbecues, and every spring, the Homeowners Association organized a big neighborhood picnic at the park. But beneath that picture-perfect charm, there were cracks Sarah didn't see. The Willow Creek HOA wasn't just strict, it was relentless. Every inch of grass, every shade of paint, and even the type of flowers you planted had to be approved. At first, Sarah brushed it off as harmless. After all, a little structure kept the neighborhood looking beautiful, right? Her first letter from the HOA came 2 months after moving in. It wasn't alarming, just a friendly reminder that her trash bins were left out past the approved pickup time. Sarah laughed, thinking it was a small misunderstanding, and corrected it immediately. But then came the second notice, and the third, and the fourth. Each time the letters grew colder, sterner, and more demanding. Sarah began to realize something unsettling. She wasn't just another homeowner to the HOA board. She was a target. What started as polite reminders quickly spiraled into unexpected accusations. There were whispers that Sarah wasn't following community standards. A board member hinted that her landscaping didn't match the aesthetic. Another claimed Ethan's basketball hoop violated an unapproved installation rule, a rule Sarah had never even heard of. At first, she tried to comply, believing that keeping the peace would make the problems go away. But the more she gave in, the more they pushed. And then came the letter that would change everything. Unlike the others, this one wasn't a simple warning. It was a notice of violation, a formal threat from the HOA demanding immediate compliance, along with hundreds of dollars in fines. Sarah felt her stomach sink as she read it over and over. Somehow, she had gone from being a proud new homeowner to being targeted, trapped in a fight she never asked for. What Sarah didn't know then was that this was only the beginning. Because the HOA was about to take things further than she ever imagined. And before long, this quiet suburban dream would turn into a full-blown nightmare. Sarah thought she understood the HOA's rules, but she was wrong. After receiving the violation notice, she spent hours reading through the 68-page Willow Creek HOA handbook, desperately trying to figure out what she'd done wrong. That's when she discovered something shocking. Half the rules being enforced against her weren't even in the handbook at all. They were board-created amendments, secret regulations voted on behind closed doors, never disclosed to homeowners. From that moment on, everything changed. The first penalty was $500 for unauthorized exterior modifications. Sarah was baffled. The so-called modification? A small set of solar-powered lights she had installed along her driveway. No one had ever said they weren't allowed. She emailed the board for clarification. Days passed, no response. Instead, another envelope arrived. $750. Fine. Reason: excessive trash bins visible from street view. Sarah broke down in tears at the kitchen table. It wasn't just the money, it was the feeling of being targeted, watched, and punished for simply living her life. But the worst was yet to come. It started subtly. Sarah noticed her neighbors, once friendly and warm, becoming distant. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when she walked by. Parents pulled their kids away from Ethan at the park. One evening, she overheard 2 board members whispering near the community mailbox. "She thinks that she can ignore us. Wait until she sees what we have planned." The rumor spread quickly that Sarah was trouble, that she was refusing to comply, and that she was bringing down the property values. Soon it wasn't just the HOA targeting her. It was the entire community turning against her family. Ethan came home from school one day with tears in his eyes. "Mom, why did Mrs. Carter say we're not good neighbors? Why won't my friends play with me anymore?" Sarah's heart broke. She realized this wasn't just a fight about rules anymore. This was personal. By the fourth month, Sarah's unpaid fines had ballooned to $4,200. The HOA warned her that if she didn't comply, they had the legal authority to place a lien on her home, meaning they could take it away. Terrified but determined, Sarah requested a meeting with the board to defend herself. What happened next would haunt her forever. She walked into the community clubhouse expecting a fair hearing, but what she faced felt more like an ambush. 5 board members sat behind a long wooden table, expressionless. One of them, HOA President Carol Jennings, slid a thick folder across the table without saying a word. Inside was a stack of alleged violations, dozens of photos of Sarah's property, timestamps, and witness statements from neighbors claiming she was disruptive and non-compliant. Sarah protested, trying to explain that half of these accusations were false. But every time she spoke, Carol cut her off. "Miss Mitchell, the board has made its decision. Either comply or face legal consequences." Sarah left the room trembling, realizing that this wasn't about fairness, safety, or community standards anymore. It was about power. After that meeting, strange things started happening. One night, Sarah came home to find red spray paint across her driveway. "Move or else." The next morning, Ethan's basketball hoop was gone. Stolen. Sarah called the HOA to report the vandalism, but Carol's cold response sent chills down her spine. "We're not responsible for your personal property, Miss Mitchell. But maybe this wouldn't happen if you just followed the rules." That's when Sarah knew. This was war. Something inside her snapped. She wasn't going to be bullied anymore. Sarah started documenting everything. Every letter, every fine, every strange incident. She recorded phone calls, saved emails, and even installed security cameras around her property. Through her research, she discovered something explosive. The HOA had been misusing community funds. Thousands of dollars collected from homeowners for maintenance were unaccounted for. Sarah knew she couldn't take them down alone, so she found Mark Reynolds, a local attorney specializing in HOA abuse cases. When Mark reviewed her evidence, he looked her straight in the eye and said, "Sarah, this isn't just harassment. This is illegal." The moment Sarah hired a lawyer, the HOA retaliated with everything they had. They sent her a final warning. Pay $7,800 in fines within 15 days, or they'd begin foreclosure proceedings. Then, late one night, Sarah woke to the sound of hammering. Looking out her window, she saw 2 men tearing down her solar lights. Under the direction of the HOA. Furious, Sarah called the police. But when officers arrived, Carol showed up waving a copy of a community bylaw amendment signed by the board. The police sided with the HOA. Sarah realized she wasn't just fighting a few neighbors. She was up against a machine designed to crush anyone who resisted. By month 7, Sarah was emotionally and financially drained. Her savings were gone, her son was miserable, and the constant harassment was affecting her work. One evening, she sat on the couch staring at the latest letter from the HOA, a foreclosure notice, when Ethan whispered softly, "Mom, are we going to lose our home?" Sarah hugged him tightly but couldn't find the words to answer. That night, she made a decision. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to give up. She was going to take them to court. With Mark's help, Sarah filed a lawsuit against the Willow Creek HOA, accusing them of harassment, defamation, and illegal financial practices. The board laughed it off until the first court summons arrived. They thought Sarah was weak. They thought she'd give up. They were wrong. Because what happened next in the courtroom would shock the entire neighborhood. The courtroom was silent, almost too silent. Sarah sat at the plaintiff's table, her hands trembling slightly as she shuffled through her neatly organized folder of evidence. On the other side of the room, The Willow Creek HOA board sat together, confident smirks plastered across their faces. At the center was Carol Jennings, the HOA president, the woman who had turned Sarah's dream home into a living nightmare. Carol leaned back in her chair, arms folded, as if she'd already won. But today, Sarah wasn't here to surrender. Today, she was here to fight. The judge entered the room and the hearing began. Sarah's attorney, Mark Reynolds, stood tall, his calm but commanding voice filling the courtroom. Your Honor, Mark began, this case isn't about property values or community aesthetics. It's about power. It's about an HOA that overstepped its authority, weaponized its rules, and harassed a single mother and her son for nearly a year. The HOA's attorney scoffed, rising to his feet. Your Honor, Miss Mitchell repeatedly violated community bylaws, ignored warnings, and refused to pay her fines. The board acted well within its legal rights. Sarah clenched her fists under the table, holding back tears. But Mark was ready. He opened the folder and began laying out evidence, one piece at a time. First, he displayed photographs of Sarah's property, highlighting the supposed violations. Then he flipped to the HOA's handbook, showing that many of the rules Sarah was fined for didn't even exist when the penalties were issued. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Mark's voice grew sharper. The board created hidden amendments, never informed homeowners, and used those secret rules to impose thousands of dollars in fines. Carol shifted uncomfortably for the first time. Then came the bombshell. Mark handed the judge a series of financial statements obtained through a subpoena. They revealed that thousands of dollars in HOA funds, collected from residents for community maintenance, had been mysteriously withdrawn, with Carol Jennings' signature on every transaction. Gas echoed across the room. The HOA attorney stammered, trying to object, but the judge allowed it. Sarah's heart pounded. This was it. The moment the board's carefully constructed facade began to crumble. But Carol wasn't going down without a fight. She stood up abruptly, her voice trembling with anger. Those funds were approved for emergency landscaping repairs. She's twisting the facts, Your Honor. Mark didn't flinch. He calmly slid another document across the table, a contractor's invoice proving the repairs never happened. The signature? Forged. Carol's face drained of color. Then, Mark turned directly to the HOA attorney. Care to explain where $28,000 of community money went? Because it didn't go into landscaping, and it didn't go into maintenance. Silence. The board members exchanged nervous glances. The HOA attorney finally muttered something about miscommunication, but the damage was done. As the tension thickened, Sarah finally found her voice. She stood, her voice steady but emotional. Your Honor, I bought my home believing Willow Creek was a safe place to raise my son, but for nearly a year, I've been harassed, humiliated, and threatened. My child has been bullied. Our property was vandalized. We've lived in fear, not because of our neighbors, but because of the very people meant to protect us. Her words struck a chord. The judge leaned forward, studying Sarah carefully. The murmurs in the courtroom died down. Even some HOA members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, as if questioning the role they had played in all of this. By midday, the board's entire defense unraveled. Email surfaced, obtained through a subpoena, showing Carol coordinating targeted harassment against Sarah, instructing board members to make her life miserable until she complies. At that moment, Carol exploded. She brought this on herself. She thought she could ignore the rules, and we showed her she couldn't. The judge banged the gavel. Miss Jennings, one more outburst and you'll be held in contempt. For the first time, Sarah saw it clearly. The power Carol thought she had was slipping through her fingers. Then Mark delivered the knockout punch. He presented a video recording from Sarah's security cameras, the one showing HOA members tearing down her solar lights in the middle of the night. The footage played on a large screen. Gasps filled the room as the judge watched in silence. When the clip ended, Mark's voice was firm and unshaken. Your Honor, the HOA has repeatedly trespassed on my client's property, issued unlawful fines, and intimidated her family. We're requesting the immediate dismissal of all penalties, removal of the lien threat, and compensation for damages. The HOA attorney objected weakly. but the judge raised a hand. "I've seen enough." The room went silent. The judge leaned forward, his voice calm but cutting. "This court finds that the Willow Creek Homeowners Association engaged in harassment, improper enforcement of non-existent bylaws, and misuse of community funds. All fines and violations against Miss Mitchell are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, the court orders the HOA to reimburse Miss Mitchell for damages in the amount of $75,000. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Carol's jaw dropped. Board members whispered frantically, faces pale as they realized the weight of the ruling. The HOA had not just lost, they had been exposed. But it wasn't over. As Sarah hugged Ethan tightly, relieved the nightmare was finally ending, Mark leaned down and whispered something chilling. "This is only the beginning. The ruling opens the door to a criminal investigation into the HOA's finances, and Carol Jennings could be facing felony charges." Sarah froze, stunned. The fight that had started with a few friendly reminders was about to explode into something much bigger, not just for her, but for the entire neighborhood. And for Willow Creek, the fallout had only just begun. Sarah walked out of the courthouse that day victorious, but not unscarred. The HOA's power had been broken, yet the neighborhood would never be the same. Because when corruption runs this deep, justice isn't the end of the story. Sarah stood on the courthouse steps, the late afternoon sun warming her face as Ethan clung tightly to her side. For the first time in months, she felt the crushing weight on her chest begin to lift. She had fought back, she had won. But this victory wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something much bigger. The ruling spread through Willow Creek Estates like wildfire. Within hours, the community's group chat exploded with messages. Some homeowners expressed shock and support for Sarah, while others, those loyal to the HOA, whispered bitterly about setting a dangerous precedent. By the end of the week, word had reached the local news. Reporters showed up at Sarah's door, eager to cover the story of a single mother who stood up against a power-hungry HOA and won. But while Sarah smiled politely for the cameras, inside she was still processing everything. Her home was safe. The lien had been removed. The $75,000 judgment would help her rebuild her savings. Yet she knew deep down, the fight wasn't over. The Willow Creek HOA boardroom, once a fortress of control, had become a war zone. 3 board members resigned within a week, citing personal reasons, though everyone knew it was because they wanted to distance themselves from Carol Jennings and her scandals. For the first time, homeowners began demanding transparency. They wanted full access to the HOA's financial records, meeting minutes, and voting procedures. Years of silence had been broken. People who once feared speaking against the board were now united. But Carol, she refused to step down. In a desperate attempt to regain control, she sent out a letter to all residents accusing Sarah of fabricating evidence and manipulating the legal system. Big mistake. Sarah forwarded the letter to her attorney, who immediately filed a defamation claim. Within days, Carol received a court order demanding she cease all contact with Sarah and her family. For the first time, the self-proclaimed Queen of Willow Creek had been silenced. But there was one thing Carol couldn't silence: the investigation. The judge's ruling had opened the door for county auditors to examine the HOA's finances, and what they uncovered was worse than anyone imagined. Tens of thousands of dollars were missing, funds meant for park maintenance, road repairs, and community improvements. Records showed payments made to phantom contractors and consultants who didn't exist. At the center of it all, Carol Jennings. Within 2 months, Carol was formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and abuse of power. Facing the possibility of prison time, she disappeared from public view entirely. For the homeowners who had suffered under her leadership, it was vindication. For Sarah, it was closure. But more than that, it was proof that standing up, no matter how small you feel, can spark change far bigger than yourself. With the old board gone, Willow Creek Estates held its first community-wide election in over a decade. This time, homeowners had a voice. They voted in a new board, one committed to transparency, fairness, and rebuilding trust. Rules were rewritten, bylaws clarified, and fines capped at reasonable limits. Instead of fear and intimidation, the HOA began focusing on improving the community. Sarah was invited to join the advisory committee, but she politely declined. She wanted peace, not politics. Still, her fight had inspired others. For the first time, Willow Creek was becoming the neighborhood it had pretended to be all along: supportive, welcoming, and united. The months following the trial were a period of quiet healing for Sarah and Ethan. The spray-painted threats were power washed away. Ethan's basketball hoop was replaced. Neighbors who had once avoided Sarah now stopped by to apologize, admitting that they had been misled by Carol's lies. One afternoon, Mrs. Carter, the same neighbor who had told children to stay away from Ethan, knocked on Sarah's door holding a plate of cookies. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I should have stood up for you." Sarah smiled, not out of bitterness, but relief. The hate, the isolation, the fear, it was finally over. But while Sarah's personal nightmare had ended, the experience left deep scars. She still woke up, sometimes expecting another violation letter to arrive. She still caught herself glancing at her cameras at night, half expecting more vandalism. And yet she also carried something new: strength. She had walked through fire and come out the other side stronger, wiser, and unafraid to speak up when something wasn't right. "I used to think keeping my head down would keep the peace," she told a reporter in an interview months later. "But sometimes silence only fuels the abuse. If you don't stand up, they'll never stop." Sarah's story became more than just a neighborhood scandal. It became a cautionary tale. Local news outlets ran feature stories on HOA abuse of power, using Sarah's case to highlight the importance of transparency and homeowner rights. Her victory sparked conversations in other communities facing similar struggles. Emails started flooding her inbox from strangers across the country. "We're going through the same thing in our neighborhood. You gave us hope." Sarah realized her fight wasn't just about saving her home. It was about exposing corruption, demanding fairness, and showing others that one voice can make a difference. In the end, Sarah's journey wasn't just about beating the HOA. It was about reclaiming control over her life, her dignity, and her community. She didn't want revenge, she wanted justice. And she got it. But here's the truth: not everyone who faces an abusive HOA wins. Many give up. Many lose their homes. Many are silenced. Sarah's story stands as a reminder. Know your rights. Document everything. Don't fight alone. Because sometimes the battle you're fighting isn't just for yourself. It's for everyone who comes after you. As Sarah looked out over her freshly mowed lawn one sunny morning, she smiled. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had taken her power back. But as peace returned to Willow Creek, a lingering question remained. How many other neighborhoods are hiding stories just like this one?